There we go. Thanks everyone for being here, and thanks also to our partner Photowings. We're very happy to be able to do these events with your support. Diane, we're very happy you're here, and we can't wait to ask you about all the things you know. Just as an introduction, Diane Smyth is an editor of the British Journal of Photography and the Photoworks Annual. She also teaches history and theory of photography at LCC, the London College of Communications. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
We're very excited. And everyone here, please feel free to ask any questions in the comments. We will try to make sure to get to all of them throughout the upcoming hour. So whenever you feel like, I want to know this or I want to know more, put it in the comments and we'll get to it. Just to start, I would really like to know how you started in this career and what was the beginning of your journey into photography and editing.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And someone asked me this recently, and I sort of said one thing that got me into it. And then I got asked again, and I said something earlier. And then, of course, like the more I think about it, the more I think of like images from earlier and earlier in my life. I guess because we all grow up with photography now. I think if I really think back, so originally I was born in Northern Ireland and my father was from Northern Ireland. So the news was something that was really important, especially after we left when I was 5 when we moved to England. So if there was a report about Northern Ireland on the news, you'd have to be quiet and everyone would have to watch it. And then there would be discussion afterwards about what we'd just been told by the news. So maybe that is an early influence, I could say. But when I was a teenager, I was always really into reading and writing. And then when I was a teenager, it was like the kind of golden age of style magazines in the UK. And I grew up in a small town. There wasn't, like art galleries or art bookshops and that kind of thing. But I could get my hands on The Face magazine, which was like one of the iconic style magazines. So that made me extra interested in photography, and it also kind of made culture feel quite kind of welcoming and a place where I would be able to work. Then I went to university, I studied English. I worked on a magazine in Birmingham, the city where I was studying. And then eventually I kind of, came to the UK, to London. And I started working as a journalist. Initially, I was doing like financial journalism just because I managed to get a job in journalism. So that was like my first goal, actually get paid to do writing. And then I obviously wanted to write about something I was a bit more interested in. And eventually I managed to get a job in BJP a really, really long time ago when it was quite a different magazine. And so I've worked on the magazine for more than 20 years now. I have been away and come back, but yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, I saw that actually on their website. She's back. Now as a staff. Yeah. But you've been there many years. I think many of us know you've been with them for a long time. I'm curious, when you said it's a totally different magazine now, can you explain a little bit what you mean by that throughout the years?
Yeah, sure. Like when I first joined, it was a weekly magazine and it was a trade magazine. It's like the kind of magazine that was very much aimed at someone working in a profession. And it would have like lots of practical advice for photographers, which is no bad thing. Like I think, that's something I'm interested in doing more of again in the magazine. But like literally we would have, what insurance would be the best insurance to have if you were going to go and photograph a wedding. And we would also have a lot of technical reviews. Then in 2010, it went monthly. Largely, not only, but in part, I suppose, because of the internet. So the impetus of having a weekly magazine wasn't quite the same anymore. So we could have news online and then the magazine could do something different in print and be like a more kind of beautiful magazine in print. Now it's a quarterly. So when I came back 2 years ago as editor, we went quarterly, but it's much, much thicker. Obviously, we do a lot online on the website and also on social media. But the magazine can now be, something that is quite different. It also follows where photography has gone in terms of photography is much more present in the art world now. So to some extent, BJP has followed that trajectory as well.
Oh, there's a sound. Am I the only one hearing that?
No, I could hear it too. I don't know what that sound was.
Gone again, which is good. That's interesting to hear how that developed. I never knew that back then the magazine was more about advice. And why is it something you would like to bring back, and in which way? I'm just curious how that could be integrated again in the way it is now.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I feel that, practical advice for photographers can be a useful thing for a photographer reader. But also, I guess because I started out in financial journalism, so I'm always quite interested in the money, like where is the money coming from? Obviously, that's a huge issue in photography. And it also, helps to shape what it is that we see in photographs. And technology is also something that I'm really interested in. So, both as a tool in the everyday for photographers, but also thinking on a more kind of almost sociological level, like what is it that the technology available to us allows us to do in terms of how we see the world, and then how we're sharing and circulating what we've seen as well.
Yeah.
So all of those things, I think it's really relevant to the photographer, a working photographer as well.
Absolutely. I was asking because it's something I miss in the magazines that I see also online, because I think when the internet became so much, when people started depending more on the internet, you think, oh, all that advice I can find somewhere. But I like it when it comes from like a trusted place. So I think it's a really good idea to reintegrate this thing that's not there anymore. I would absolutely read it. So what are your major responsibilities? Actually, at both places, not just at the British Journal of Photography, but also at the Photoworks Annual.
Yeah, so BJP, I run the editorial in the print magazine. We have a really brilliant online editor, Dalia Aldujali. So I sort of keep an eye on what she's doing, but basically she's great. So I just let her get on with it. The magazine also does like various events. I speak at, various symposia and stuff like that. So, I mean, that is also part of my job. And to get out there and meet people and meet photographers and see work that's out there in the world. But yeah, day to day, it's making sure that the print magazine comes together. We choose a theme each issue, which is partly to help, because otherwise, you could do any photography in the world, which is quite expansive. But also, it's kind of interesting. I really like the idea that I can sort of choose a topic or a field that I'm interested in, and then go and talk to people about various facets of that. Like, say, for example, recently I got to speak with 2 experts in Japanese photography. I kind of felt like this is amazing. It's a bit like I'm designing my own BA as I'm going along, because I can choose topics I want to know more about, and then go and talk to like world experts about those things. So that's an amazing opportunity. And yeah, the next issue is looking at the body, because I'm still thinking about what photography does, like how can it bring us closer to what we see, and how does it maybe distance us from what we see. So I've been exploring that in various different projects, but the next BJP is definitely like another aspect of that ongoing question for me.
That's really interesting, Diane. That was something I wanted to ask you, was this sort of thematic approach, like who decides? Who has that call? You obviously, but is it a collective approach? Is it a team approach to deciding what these themes are going to be? And is it really rooted in what's going on in the contemporary world, or is it more driven by personal interests? I'm kind of curious to know how you come up with the themes.
It's kind of all of those things, really. Like, we have some set issues. Like, say, for example, in June, we do Ones to Watch, which is where we talk with people all over the world who very generously give up their time and contacts, and they recommend interesting emerging photographers. So that's always a really fun issue. But then the other issues in the year are a bit more free. Where do we get the ideas from them? I suppose I've got like my various like strange interests, and then I might say to the guys in the office, oh, I'm thinking about, like, the last one we did was maps. You know, reality is bigger than what can be contained within photography. So we looked at that from various different points of view and different technologies that you can use to look at the world. But then it was a bit like, well, we've done quite a few issues that were quite kind of techie in a way. So it would be nice to do something that feels a bit warmer. So that was one of the reasons that I thought it'd be interesting to do the body issue next.
And how long do you work on each issue? Like, when did you start it on the body issue, and when will it be out?
Well, we finished the body issue on the 7th of November, but it comes out in the beginning of December. This is actually thinking about, you know, from the point of view of photographers, when you pitch to magazines, we work incredibly far ahead, I think. So basically, in the upfront pages, we have like the agenda where we talk about forthcoming exhibitions and so on. But those are already planned, and it's like 9th of October now. And the magazine is coming out in December. Mm-hmm. So we need to know things at least like 2 months in advance. It's great that we have the internet, because obviously some exhibitions aren't planned that far ahead. So it's great that we have the latitude that we can do more, like, you know, up to the minute stuff online. But yeah, for print, you need to, if you want to be in a magazine like BJP that doesn't come out so often, you need to get in touch really, really far ahead.
And know the theme, maybe, or how does that work? Do you guys communicate the theme to, I don't know, do you share it online? Like, this is our upcoming theme.
Yeah, no, but that could be an interesting thing to do. But for things like the upfront section, we don't tend to theme it. They're just like, you know, interesting exhibitions coming up. I do sometimes speak with freelancers. So if they're kind of like, oh, you know, I want to do a feature for BJP, and then I might say to them, this is a theme I'm thinking of. So I've got like this kind of network of people out there in the world who can hopefully pick up interesting things that are related. Maybe it's a good idea, though, to say we've got a theme coming up and see what comes in.
I'm sure you'll get a lot in, maybe more than you were hoping for.
Yeah,
it'd be dangerous.
I don't know how much extra time you have in a week, but I think it could be a popular. What I think in general photographers like about themes is that we work on very different subjects sometimes, and if they're not very newsworthy, it can be quite difficult to get them pitched somewhere. If magazines work with themes, that's always a really great moment to get the work seen. So I think it would be. Yeah, I would be a fan of you telling everyone what the theme is. I would definitely send something in. So
that's cool. We do have an open email as well, like a submissions email, which is something that I've been quite keen to keep. We don't necessarily answer all of the emails that come in, which I apologize for, but we just don't have time to answer. But I really like the idea that anyone from anywhere in the world who's able to send an email can therefore get in touch with us. Say, for example, when I first started working in photography, people would physically come into the office with a printed portfolio. So they had to have been able to make that portfolio. They had to have been able to get to London. They had to have been able to get in the room with us. So there were so many hurdles to people being able to show their work to the team. So yeah, I really like the idea that people can just send us a quick email. And also people sometimes contact me via my Instagram as well, which is absolutely fine. And again, I really like the idea that it's so much more open then to people anywhere.
That's great. Would you mind sharing the email address so we can put it in the screen somehow? Would you mind?
Let me double check what it is. So it's submissions at 1854.photography.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. I think Fiona's working on it and putting it
up. Checking my spelling before I hit send.
Yeah.
There we go. You can check that that's correct in the chat.
Yeah, we do look at them all. We don't necessarily answer all of the email, but we do have a look.
Thank you. Thanks so much for sharing. Oh, wait. Dot what? Oh, dot photography. Sorry. Yeah, no, dot photography. Sorry, I was confused for a bit. Okay, shall we start with your presentation? I'm very excited.
Yeah. Okay, let me share my screen.
I haven't really kept a good track of the comments. Are there? No, there are no questions yet. Please, guys, put questions in if you want to know something.
Okay, so can you see it? Okay.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah.
Thanks, man.
Perfect.
Okay, cool. So this is me, Diane Smyth, and that's my Instagram handle, DieSmy. So on Instagram, I put like my various projects because the majority of my work now is at BJP, but I also have got the Photoworks annual, and I sometimes do freelance work still. And if I've seen like a really interesting exhibition or book or something like that, I would put that on as well. So first of all, I thought I'd go through some of the stuff that we've done at the British Journal of Photography. So this is our current issue, the one that I said there, maps. So I was thinking of the impossibility really of making a map which is fully comprehensive, because if it was fully comprehensive, it would be everything in the world, and then it would no longer be a useful working map. So the cover here is by Elsa Ladier, who is an eco-feminist. So she's kind of looking at the idea that, photography is drawn from an imperial kind of worldview, and it can sort of like take and grab pictures of things, which is a bit similar to how you might actually just appropriate something. So in her work, she kind of resists photography a bit. And it's not pure formalism. There's kind of that idea running behind it. So in this image, this is a picture of herself, but she's painted it red, and then on top she's stuck these other images. We've got like a few different sections in the magazine. So we have agenda where we might have exhibitions and so on. Then we have projects where we do like shorter pieces on particular projects. So this is Nicolas Garrido, a really nice work that he did, which also played with the materiality of photography. I suppose that's a particular interest of mine. This is a much longer feature that we did. Zofia Rydet, who's a Polish photographer, who kind of quite obsessively really went into people's homes and took pictures of them in Poland in kind of the 70s, 80s, early 90s, recording a specific time in Polish history, which is so incredibly expansive, but then of course it's not absolutely everything either. So we felt that was a good fit for the maps issue. This is more of Elsa's work. This is a past issue of BJP called Virtual Reality. So we published this one not long after all the violence started to happen in Gaza. And it was kind of the idea, that we're sort of scrolling through this incredible mix of images on our phones, seeing all kinds of scenes of violence, but also, seeing our everyday pictures of our friends and family showing their babies and whatnot. So it was a whole issue, again, looking at what is it that we can see when we look at photographs. So the cover's by Arko Datto. Indian photographer.
Yeah,
great guy. I also I interviewed quite a few people about AI, but not just AI. These are AI images. It was really looking at like what is the technology that sits behind being able to make photorealistic images. It was super, super interesting. But I suppose for me, it kind of fitted in with the idea that you have to question what it is you're looking at, like where it's come from and how it's been made and what it is that it's showing you.
Did you, I'm curious with this, when did this come out?
That's a very good question, which I can't remember.
I'm just wondering what the response was, because many of us love the theme, and I know many of photographers are very, maybe even against AI, even though it's here already. What was the response, being a photography magazine focusing on virtual reality, AI, and this topic?
Yeah, well, it wasn't a whole topic which was looking at AI, actually. This was one feature within the issue. Like, say, for example, another feature that we ran in that issue was Tasia Batniji, who is a Palestinian artist based in France. And these were screen grabs he took when he was on calls with his family. And, you know, quite often the calls would break up and they would become very pixelated. So he would no longer see like a clear image of who it is that he was speaking with. So it's kind of looking at, you know, what is it that we're looking at when we're looking at images, and looking at like what's the technology that sits behind what you're looking at, and how does that influence what you're looking at. And the article that I wrote about AI, actually, it made me less I mean, it's not that I was super enthused about AI, but I wasn't necessarily against AI. But having spoken with all of these people about, you know, the data sets on which AI is trained and how the AI is trained and the keywording that goes into it, it made me much more not exactly suspicious, but wary of AI images and the worldview that's being presented to you when you look at a composite image. Because all of the kind of, you know, biases and maybe negative biases that people have go into the keywords, and therefore go into the images that come out of the other end of AI. So, I mean, I'm sure that anyone interested in photography is already thinking about AI, but if you have the opportunity to read a bit about how it's made, and you know, the work that goes on behind the scenes, which is done by humans, actually, a lot of the time, it's not all done by computers. It's really, really interesting, and quite an eye-opener as well, I think. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. So this is the last ones to watch issue that we did. I mentioned that we do it every June. We pick like 15 emerging photographers who are not all necessarily young. You know, you might be someone older who didn't have opportunities when you were younger, or we had one photographer in a recent issue who had had children and had taken up photography when her children became more independent. The cover is by Dunia Zita, who is based in the Netherlands, actually, I think. We also, one of the younger artists that we featured was Chanyu Wang, who comes from China originally. I found it super interesting. I've included her because I was really, really interested speaking with her in her approach to images, because obviously, coming from China, she comes from a different art history. So she was telling me about, you know, in traditional Chinese painting, you don't have like a single point of perspective. You have several different points of perspective within one image. And the idea is that it is a flow moving through the image. And maybe you can kind of see that in some of her work, in that she works a lot with collages, but she's sort of questioning the view of the camera, basically, the particular perspective and ideology that's embedded in the camera. So I really liked her work, and I found her very interesting to speak with. This is some more of her work. I also wanted to mention, even though I'm not very actively involved in it, BJP does something called Portrait of Britain, where we take over ad slots, basically, across the UK. We originally launched it after the Brexit vote in the UK, which was a time in which, you know, discussion about nationality and who's British and who's not became much more fraught in the UK, as it has become everywhere. And this was kind of an opportunity to say, what do people look like in Britain, though? So it's just pictures of people in the UK who might just be here on holiday, or they might have lived here their whole life. It's just, you know, what is the population of this particular country? And it goes on billboards all around the country. And we really like the fact that it goes into public space. So, you know, art galleries aren't always places that everyone feels comfortable going to, but you can't really escape the Portrait of Britain when it happens. So yeah, that's our like little intervention into the UK.
I love that. I have a question about that, actually. What do you think the responsibility of a magazine is in this case? Because I think it's amazing that you guys do this, really. And how your role in that, maybe in other ways too.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know do we have a responsibility? Maybe we have the opportunity to do it. So as we're able to take over these ad spaces, it kind of, seems like a nice thing to be able to do with it. It's quite interesting to see, because, we get feedback on it because it's such a public thing. And the kind of feedback that we get has changed over the years and maybe has become, more questioning of who's British and who isn't, which is interesting for us to see because, obviously it's different images every year, but as a group, they're not radically different in who they're showing each year. So yeah, it's an interesting discussion. It's also interesting to work with images in public space as well, because there are certain parameters that you have to stick to. So for example, we can't include images of people who are smoking. So that's just an interesting insight really into, there are quite a lot of images in the public space and they're governed by certain rules. So what you're seeing is, and what you're consuming on a day-to-day basis is governed by certain rules too.
Oh, that almost feels like a project on its own.
Yeah.
To now know what's filtered out, what is seen as norm or healthy or good for us people to see in the public space and what is not.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's an interesting.
I didn't know that. Interesting. Thanks for sharing that.
That's cool. So these are some older BJPs, because as I mentioned, I've worked there for a really, really long time. So this is back in 2016. So the editor that originally employed me, Simon Bainbridge, was a really brilliant editor, but he would sometimes let me take over. So these are a couple of much, much older ones that I did. This one was all about, photographs of rich people. Kind of my thinking was, we see loads of pictures of people who are poor, or who have got various social issues. But do we see pictures of people at the other end of the scale? And if so, what are the images that we see? So I suppose, everyone in photography now is much more conscious about the gaze. Whose gaze is it that we're looking at, and whose images is it that we're seeing? So I suppose that was around the time that maybe I became so much more conscious about that too. This is one from 2014. So this is basically just after I came back to work, having had a baby. So I had a year off and I was in the company of women nearly all the time. So when I got back to work, obviously I had been aware that photography in 2014 was quite male dominated, but having spent a year with so many other women on maternity leave, coming back into the industry, it was so shocking just how male dominated it was. So I pitched the idea to Simon, let's do an issue which is only women photographers. And we had a bit of a discussion about it, are there so few women in photography? And I was like, right. So I literally, went to various photographic agencies and galleries, went to their websites, and I literally counted the number of photographers and how many were men and how many were women. And it was shockingly low. So this was kind of a bit of a stunt, I suppose. There are women photographers enough to fill a whole magazine. And sometimes I think about this, would this still feel like something that I wanted to do? And I feel that things have moved on a lot in photography, but I don't know. I think it's also not just photography's problem. It's obviously the society that we live in partly governs who it is making images.
But there's better representation now, Diane, across the different organizations that you work with. Do you see more balance than there was it?
Yeah, there's definitely more balance. But I think that some of it is out of the hands of the photography industry, because it's to do with access to affordable childcare and various issues like that. So, the photography can do certain things to try to move culture along, which I really believe in that as an idea. I believe that art and culture can evolve what we're doing as societies, but also there are limits as well to what we can achieve.
I really think those kind of publications, especially back then, really helped us female photographers as well, because you feel more seen and you realize that there's people in the industry that realize it's a very male-driven instead of being silent about it, those types of stories really helped, I must say. So
Oh, good. That's nice to hear. Yeah. Okay. So, gosh, I'm aware that time is flying by. So this is Photoworks is a different kind of a company to the British Journal of Photography. So BJP, it's a private company. We don't have any arts funding, no state funding. We basically, what we can earn, then we can spend it on making the magazine. So I had the opportunity to work with Photoworks when I had left BJP for a bit and was freelancing. I got a job working at Photoworks, which is an arts charity, which does have some government funding, and they also, fundraise in other ways too. They have pots of money to give to photographers to make new work. So they do, photography commissions. They do a huge amount of work that's not really seen, but is so valuable, where they're looking at, kind of education and access to photography and access to education in thinking about photography as well. But the main thing that I thought was a really fun thing to get to work on was the annual, which is a publication made once a year, which is sent to the Photoworks members, and also you can buy it in the shops. So this is the one that I did in 2023, which is called The Thing. I got really interested in, where has photography as a technology come from, and what's the ideology which is embedded in photography. So partly this came from reading Ariella Azoulay. She's got this essay in a book of essays called Capitalism and the Camera, where she says something like, imagine photography wasn't invented with the camera, but was invented in 1492. So, imagine it's some kind of like an imperial worldview, basically. And that certain way of looking at the world had led to the technology being able to be invented. Which I thought was a really super interesting idea. So it's called The Thing because the idea is that the camera may thingify, it may reify or objectify what it shows. And it had this shiny cover so that when you take a picture, you as the photographer are included. So you have to think about the gaze of the person taking the picture. Also, I thought it's quite fun that then anyone can be like a cover girl as well. So anyone can be on a front cover. So the photographers that I gathered for this, they were often people who were looking at kind of formal properties of photography. So this is Gianna de Dia, who is looking at photographs of, I think it's Panama. So she's mixing archival images with, present day images and her own work, and trying to destabilize the view of the camera. This is Tabitha Soren, surface tension. So she took pictures of iPads which were slightly in the sun, so you can see all the swipes of the fingers. And she's chosen, news images, often about, really terrible events. But what she's doing is saying, there's always like this surface in between us and these terrible events that we're seeing. So we feel that the image is informing us about what's going on, but we are also always distanced from it. This is a woman called Matilda Soos Rasmussen, who is an artist, and she was, I think she maybe still does some modeling. And she did a project called Sue Me, in which, so these are not her images, they were images taken of her when she was modeling. And she was kind of like, well, I'm the person in the picture, therefore it's my image, actually. And I can take it, and she manipulated it and changed the colors and did things to it. She's basically, questioning, just because I'm in the image, does that mean that I no longer have any say over what happens with the image, or whose image is it actually? Which I thought was very interesting. The next year for the annual, I kind of hadn't quite finished with the idea of like, what is the technology of photography? So I looked at, photography was invented, and the very first photographs were one-offs. They were single images. But then it was Fox Talbot in the UK, the centre of industrial capitalism, who was super keen actually to make photography something reproducible. So I was looking at the idea of multiples. So I was gathering both images which are multiples, but also sort of what they show about multiples in our society as well. This is by Jason Grant and Oliver Vodeb. They did a picture series. It's quite a simple technique, really. They just would have one archive image with another archive image and just put them together on spreads. But some of the pairings are really kind of thought-provoking. And this one I thought was really thought-provoking. You know, the idea that there is a single ideal Coke bottle or a single ideal Nazi soldier that we can reproduce over and over and over, and it will be exactly the same every time. You know, what does that say about how we're approaching the world? This is a young Chinese artist, Njiokiktjien, who is looking at chinoiserie, the sort of huge enthusiasm that there was for Chinese art and culture in the Victorian era in the UK, but also how some of those so-called reproductions of Chinese culture were wrong. So her project includes the pagoda at Kew Gardens, which is meant to be modeled on a Chinese pagoda, but it has the wrong number of stories. And she's got this amazing collection of, you know, Victorian postcards and stereoscopes, trying to reproduce the idea of, you know, something that is a single thing in China.
So these projects are all very, as in style, quite different from each other. I'm curious how they get to you. Like, how do you have a taste for certain projects? Because it seems like a very broad, within one magazine, very broad types of images. I'm just curious how you find all of this together. It's amazing to see the diversity, but how do you do it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess if someone asks me, like, what's the kind of photography that I like, I find it quite hard to answer because I like all kinds of different stuff. And I find it quite interesting how different, like different facets of, to me, what might be one idea, like how differently that can be approached with different techniques or different styles, or where I see things is like all over. Like I have to delete Instagram off my phone because I could be on that forever otherwise. Yeah. And I often take screen grabs as I go along. So I try to collect things as I go along. I go to lots of exhibitions. Obviously, people are emailing me. Yeah, I don't know, really. Festivals, all the usual places where people see photographs, I guess.
Which festivals do you like to go to see work?
I go to Arles. That's like the really big photography festival, I would say. I have been to various others. I don't go to so many now, to be honest, because I have a kid, so I don't want to be away from my family too much. But it's really interesting. For example, I went to China years ago to the Lanzhou festival. That was super interesting to go to another country and see, you know, what the photography at that time, which is more than 10 years ago, what was happening in their photography scene at the time. I went to the photo festival in Krakow. I really enjoyed that one. I've never been to the Venice Biennale, but I think that could be really interesting to see how photography is approached in a big arts festival. Photo London. Paris Photo is an interesting one, actually, because obviously there is the central photography fair, but there's more and more happening outside it, and it more and more has the feeling of a meeting place. So people all over the world are gathering there. And I suppose the more that happens, then the more that happens, because the more people from all over the world who are there, the more useful it is. So that's a fun one to go to as well. Yeah.
And then, of course, people reach out to you via just knowing you, or the submission form, or the submission email address. People already have questions about that, but we will get to them. Okay, but thanks. Thanks for telling us.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so this is the last one I included from the Photoworks annual. I started to look at how can we like rehabilitate photography a bit, and how is photography not reproducible. So this is Reina Abella, who's an artist in the Philippines, and she used really early photographic techniques to take a picture of the Virgin Mary, like an icon of her, Mater Dolorosa, which is apparently a really famous one. And then she put the images together. And obviously you can see, because it's an early technique, it's quite unreliable. So the images aren't exact doubles of each other. So I guess I kind of came back around to, in our lives, things aren't exactly reproducible ever. Okay, should I keep going? I feel that time is going very quickly. Yeah.
Yeah, please do.
That's a good sign.
Yeah.
All very interesting. So please don't mind the time.
Yeah. So I don't do so much freelance journalism now because I'm pretty busy, but I do a bit of like keep my hand in. And I suppose maybe this is useful advice for photographers actually in thinking about how different publications approach photography. So say, for example, I've written a fair amount for The Guardian. So there, I'm not writing for an audience that, knows about photography. It's more a general audience. And the arts desk there, they're really interested in what is a really good story. So obviously they have to be nice images, but what they're really interested in is a story that can grab general readers, people who aren't necessarily into photography. So this was a really cool project by Cami Talui, which she actually shot years and years ago, I think in the 90s in San Francisco when she was working in a peep show. She was also training as a photojournalist at college. And the college gave them an assignment to photograph their place of work, which I think is hilarious because I think they probably weren't expecting what she did. So she was like, I could take a picture of the other women who are working in the peep show, but, we've all seen that a million times, pictures of women stripping. So she was like, what I will do instead is I'll take pictures of the men who are watching. And she, got permission from the men. She worked in like a private cabin and she had like, ongoing working relationships with the guys who were watching her. Like she knew them and they would come back to her. So some of the images are incredibly candid. But she didn't actually manage to show the images for a really, really long time. But a few years ago, she published them as a book with Void. And something that I think is quite interesting actually is that the images still feel really taboo. So the headline here in The Guardian is, I felt this needed to be seen. But then the images of the guys are quite small. The image that is larger is the image of the woman. So, it's still the case that we're more comfortable with her as the subject rather than the men.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
I was trying to move closer to see where are these guys.
Yeah.
But it's a great topic. A lot of trust to be won there.
Yeah, she was really open-minded about the guys. She talked about how some of them, they had various, sexual proclivities that they couldn't necessarily express in their day-to-day lives, so they could come to her. Yeah, she's a super interesting woman, a really nice woman. So these are other ones that I've done for The Guardian. This is David O'Mara, who is an Irish guy. He works as a professional painter, like painting houses. And, he did go to art college and he tried to get work in London in the art gallery scene, but he found that there were a lot of barriers to entry. So he, started working as a house painter and he integrates that in his work now, which he's a very inspirational guy, I think. This is Once Upon a Time in Hackney. This was the Rio Cinema. They had a film and photography group back in the 80s where people who were living in Hackney at a time when you didn't necessarily access cameras so easily, they got training in taking pictures and developing pictures and making pictures. And so years and years later, this archive was discovered and then made into a book. So I suppose all three of these ones that I've picked out are, again, thinking about whose gaze is it that we're looking at when we're looking at these photos. This is something that I did for Apollo magazine, I think, where I tried to go a bit behind the scenes. It was a bit scary, actually, because basically what I was doing was I was asking the big institutions in the UK about the money, like what is the money that you get and where does it come from? It was really interesting to write. But I was a freelancer at that point, and I definitely felt a bit like if I get something even the slightest bit wrong, this could go very badly for me. So you know, when it came out, loads of people said to me, it's really brilliant that you've written this feature, and people don't talk about the money, and it's bad they don't talk about the money. And I was a bit like, yeah, I totally agree, but you have to understand why people don't talk about the money, because it's a bit scary. And as a freelance journalist, you don't have that many protections.
Oh, it's quite brave to do so.
I'm not sure if it was brave or foolhardy. I didn't necessarily really think it through, but it was definitely really interesting to write, that's for sure. This is something for the art newspaper. I have written various things, again, more about like the industry. How does the industry that sits behind photography work? Which again, I think is very interesting, because, you know, what you see in galleries or art fairs, there are all kinds of players who are influencing what goes into those places. I also write a bit for Creative Review, which is more aimed for people who are working in advertising. So they run some photography, which might be, you know, advertising photography, but they take quite a broad approach to photography. But they also run things like illustration and graphic design and so on. And this is Trigger, which is run by FOMU, which is a photography institution based in Antwerp. They have a free website which runs, well, not necessarily saying that my article was so interesting, but they do run very interesting articles, and it's all free. So, you know, anyone can access the kinds of writing that they include. It's kind of a bit academic, but it's not necessarily, you know, actually academic. Like the general reader can read it as well.
I don't know. It's called Trigger, right?
Trigger, yeah. It's fun. This one I wrote about, there was an exhibition at the MEP, the Maison Européenne de la Photographie in Paris, which was intimate images. So it was a lot of images that photographers had taken of their lovers, really. And some of them, you know, really quite frank. So, but it also introduced the idea of writing about, you know, similar, you know, diaristic kind of style of writing. And it got me thinking a lot about what does it mean to publish that kind of writing compared to that kind of photography, and what are some of the differences in, you know, photography and writing when you're doing it about a particular person in quite an intimate way. And then finally, I've included some essays that I've been invited to do, which is always really, really fun. You get to have a bit more latitude, I suppose, in the kind of thing that you're writing. So this was looking at, it was called Power and Paper. It was an exhibition run by NUA, who are really great guys based in Norway. And they gave me total freedom just to look at archives. And I had recently discovered about this huge bonfire of archives, which happened when the UK colonial powers were leaving India. They had a lot of photographic records of what they had done. But a lot of that material was burnt. And then the bonfires became so huge that the smoke became really noticeable, and it became kind of embarrassing. People could see what they were doing. So then they started to sink various records at sea, which is absolutely fascinating. I think, like, who knows what they were getting rid of, but also, you know, only certain things would have been recorded by those people as well. So it's not that it was a record of everything in India. It was their take of what they were doing in India. Yeah.
What an amazing experience to be able to dive into something like that.
Yeah, really, really interesting.
I'm curious how you, I mean, this stretches several years, right? But it seems the way you're working, you have to combine a lot.
Yeah.
Is it with your teaching, you're an editor, you're at two places, you're doing the essays. How do you, is it possible to kind of use the one skill in the other place and using an interview that you did for someone somewhere else? Or is this all separate things? And are you just a master of organizing?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think that I'm not unusual. Like, so many people who work in creative fields are juggling lots of different jobs.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I'm sure loads of people out there know exactly what it's like. Also, I would say as well that people often ask me this, but it's easier than when, for example, I first went back to work with a really young child at home, and I was just working at one place, but juggling having a really young child at home and working is much more of a juggle, I would say, because it's much more unpredictable. But people don't often ask you about that because that kind of stuff is in the home and therefore private and unseen.
Yes.
But yeah, the other thing that I would say is that obviously, these things do influence each other. I suppose, again, it's interesting for photographers, I think, thinking about, what is the outlet that you're trying to work with, because maybe I'll stop sharing. Say, for example, BJP is not necessarily a place where I'm going to publish an academic essay, but the kinds of thinking that I do in the university and the kinds of things that I read, they definitely influence the kind of photography that I'm interested in and the kind of themes that I'm interested in. So, yeah, I mean, I suppose I very much think that, certain things play out in visual thinking, not necessarily in text thinking. So, maybe I can read stuff that's more academic. And then in BJP, I have the opportunity to say, how is this playing out in photographers' work and the kinds of work that they produce or the subjects they choose and so on. Yeah.
So there's a bit of a crossover, or you can make it crossover at certain moments.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say it was quite nice when I got the job at the university, because I do read quite a lot of quite academic theory. I'm really interested in theory. So sometimes I would think, well, why am I doing this? So the university is definitely a home where, that is very much called for. But yeah, I kind of encourage anyone to read theory, actually. And one of the things that we have to do at the university is sometimes we have to sell it a little bit to the students. Why would you be reading theory when you've come to university to make images? As some of them don't find that an obvious crossover. And it's kind of like, there are various issues in photography, and especially ethical issues, that other people have thought about before. So if you read about these issues, you can kind of get some help. It's not just going to be you on your own trying to think these things through and make work while you're doing it.
Yeah, because if you don't read anything, you will bump into these same issues and try to solve them yourself, even though someone else has already done work. What is other advice, and then we'll get to some of the questions in the comments, but what is some of the advice you would have for new photographers starting out in this industry to kind of get their voice out there and their work?
I mean, I would say don't be shy and don't feel that you are kind of unworthy of some institution or another. I can definitely understand the idea of, cultural capital. Like, if you haven't grown up in certain environments, it can feel really intimidating to approach magazines or galleries, or you can feel that that's not your place. But I would even say it's in fact the opposite. If you don't see a lot of people like you being represented in a certain institution, then they certainly should be extra interested in hearing from you, because you have a perspective that they're not engaged with at the moment. I would definitely say, just give it a shot. Like, people used to have to come in to see me physically with a printed portfolio, whereas now you just have to send an email or even just get in touch via Instagram. So it's not hard. So just do it. Don't be afraid. And you might not hear anything back. And we apologize for that. But, it doesn't mean that your work is terrible. And if you keep going, just keep trying, then eventually something is going to land for sure. If you can go to festivals and private views and things like that, that can definitely also help. But if you can't, I don't think that it's a closed door. I would say also try to, look at what other people are doing and look at what some of the magazines are interested in. Think about, the particular approach of different magazines. So the kind of story that The Guardian would publish, sometimes it's the same story that BJP would publish, but sometimes they're quite different because, BJP is read by a particular group of people who have photographic knowledge. So we might be interested in something that's a bit different to what The Guardian realistically is going to run.
Yeah. And Diane, is there anything that strikes you when you're looking at the work across all of these different photographers and across the different publications that you engage with? are there common things that you notice that trip photographers up? Is there simple fixes out there that you think if they could just get on top of that would really elevate not so much the work, but the way that they get their work out there and how they present their work? Is there anything that you see and you think that's something that people could sharpen up would really help elevate them?
Yes. Sometimes people have cut and pasted text and they've obviously sent it to another magazine and then they send it to me with the other magazine's name. I don't know. But I understand, like, I'm sure I've done the same thing when I was a freelancer and I was pitching. So, you know, we understand that you're human beings and you make mistakes sometimes. I think it is really that, though, trying to have in mind the audience that you're going to be trying to reach and who it is you're speaking to. So the particular edit of images or the images that you send, they might vary from magazine to magazine, or from gallery to gallery or individual to individual. So it's not that you don't have like a core. There's obviously like your stuff that you're interested in that doesn't change, but you can maybe kind of edit just a bit to fit it into certain slots.
Thank you. That's solid advice. I love to hear that you also understand when people do make that mistake of leaving in the name.
That's very kind.
There's a question coming in from Jamie, or maybe Jaime. Jamie, I don't know how to pronounce your name. I'm so sorry. When photographers submit work to the email that was posted, do you want to see small JPEGs in the email or a link to images? So that's a very,
Yeah, no, that's a really good question, actually. I want to see small JPEGs in the email. I don't really want to have to go somewhere else, because often there's like then a bit of a wait, or I get lost, or I'm therefore trying to go somewhere else. It's much easier if everything is all in one place. Also, yeah, I don't particularly want to have to go and download images from somewhere else, because I downloaded a virus last year. The IT guy at work was most concerned. So yeah, just, you know, bear in mind that it's much easier if we're not having to download stuff, because we don't always know what it is that we're downloading.
Thank you. And Deborah, and this goes back to the early on in your presentation about shooting the rich. She says, I imagine shooting the rich would have been challenging from a have-not perspective. How was that project commissioned?
Yeah, we don't actually commission very much in the magazine, I'm afraid. It's mostly work that people have already made, so existing projects. But you're right, though, shooting the rich is challenging, because rich people have the opportunity, which other people don't necessarily have, to restrict who can take photographs of them and the kind of photographs that they can take. So that was something I was really interested in, you know, like the kind of power that they have as subjects that other subjects don't necessarily have. So yeah, that's the exact question, really.
And she was also curious how, you might not know that then because it wasn't a commission, but I'm curious if you know, or she's curious to know how many were in the end said yes. Do you know this, and how many said no? Because
yeah, yeah, that issue of the magazine, we carried a few different approaches. So the one that was on the front cover is Zed Nelson, who's a great photographer, and he's also quite charming, which I think probably helped, because he seemed to have managed to get into the private rooms of quite a few wealthy people. We also carried work by Karen Noor, which she had made in the 70s, I think, 70s, 80s. But her access in that case was that she came from a more upper class family, and her father was a member of a club. I think this is the story anyway. So they were, you know, introduced to her. So it's a certain network of people that if you have an introduction, you can be in that network, but it might be much harder for others. But then we also, we ran some images by a guy called Doogie Wallace, who just literally hung out outside Harrods and took pictures of people on the pavement. So, you know, you can argue about the ethics of just, you know, putting a camera in someone's face and taking a picture. Often now people, especially students at the university, it's quite interesting. They're very reticent about taking pictures of people without their permission, which I totally understand. But on the other hand, it is useful sometimes to see pictures of people that they wouldn't necessarily approve. And the example that I always give the students at university is, when we were all in our lockdown in the UK, Boris Johnson was having parties in the back garden of 10 Downing Street. Eventually, images emerged of that, which I'm sure he would much rather that those images had never come out. But I think it's, in the public interest that they did.
Absolutely. Yeah. Also, when I teach, I get and maybe Fiona too, I don't know, a lot of questions from students about asking people to be in photographs or not. And yeah, they feel, there's a different generation moving up. I don't know how to exactly explain what I mean, but you just explained it best. And it really surprises me because I agree with you. I think it's great, but you also have to realize when it's news or when it really serves the public, the image needs to be made, in my opinion.
Yeah. Also, I'm also interested as well. Like, I don't necessarily, always just run documentary photography, although I love documentary and we do run documentary photography. But I'm often interested in, projects which are about something going on in the world. So sometimes I feel that younger photographers, there's almost a tendency that they only want to take pictures of themselves and their own lives, which, diaristic approaches can be super interesting. There's definitely value in that work and kind of really embracing that subjectivity. But at the same time, there's a lot going on in the world. So I think it's really important that we keep hold of the idea that we want to address big topics in work as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely agree. James has a question, recognizing the potential commercial sensitivities, but do you share or socialize your future topics list? Your comment that you work way in advance.
Well, that's what you said as well. So maybe it's something that we should do. I hadn't really thought of it. But
is there already an upcoming one that you might be able to share? Is this company sensitive?
No, not really. I mean, to be honest, I'm still thinking about what the next issue might be about. And so far, the one that really appeals to me is cars. But I have to say, I said that in the office today, and everyone was a bit like, "What are you talking about? A whole issue about cars?" So we'll see if that one gets off the ground. Yeah.
Enough photography from that topic, I'm sure, to look. To look out from. Yeah.
Interesting.
Let me see if I missed, or maybe Fiona, did I miss a question?
I don't think so. I think we've covered most of them, but Diane, I have a question, if you don't mind. I'm going to butt in here now. And I kind of forewarned you, I might ask you this question as well. And it was about, you'd written for Peter Mitchell in one of his recent publications, which was Nothing Lasts Forever. And in a kind of reflection on that piece of work, in discussing photography, he said, it's a necessity. And I was really interested to know your position on that now in the world that we're living in the face of AI and everything that we're contending with right now. How do you view photography? Is it a necessity? Do you agree with him? Like, what's your thinking on that?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. For Peter Mitchell, I think that's very interesting that he said that as well. He grew up in a working class family in London. He wasn't from a background where he would necessarily have become this photographer. But for him, he was obviously very compelled to do it. Do I think photography is a necessity? I have to say, like, over the last few years, I've been quite critical of photography in some ways, in as much as, it's a very certain perspective that is that the technology has grown from. And in some ways, it's a perspective that I'm not very aligned with. However, so sometimes I think about what would it be like to live in a world where there weren't any photographs? I mean, up until, 200 years ago, that was everyone's reality. And now we're so immersed in a world of images, and increasingly so. Like, if I go to Oxford Street, the main shopping street in London, it's just dazzling how many images there are, and videos and mannequins. And this, it's been said before, but it's this total confusion between what's real and what's image. But on the other hand, we do have photography. So then I think it's really important to engage with photography. And if we have these kind of questions about photography, to make sure that we're asking them, and also asking them in a way that the general public is hearing. So recently at LCC, actually, they did a whole conference looking at images of war, contemporary images of war. But one of the things that I really, really liked about that conference was that it was very low cost. It was also streamed online. They've also put the talks online so anyone can access it. And, they had picture editors from the New York Times or Reuters. They had photographers. They had all kinds of people talking about, the kinds of issues that we in photography talk about a lot. What are the ethics of certain images, and how are they made, and how are they circulated, and how do all of those things express power, really. So I think it's really important that other people, the general public, also gets to hear some of those debates, so they can be asking those kind of questions when they're looking at more and more images every day, and sort of questioning a little bit what it is that they're looking at.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
It's interesting. I think, I know you wrote a piece recently, and it was about images of peace as opposed to images of war, because we're so accustomed to seeing images of war and, shining a light on photographing peace and using photography to seek solutions. I mean, what do you feel? What's next in your mind, given you have such a finger on the pulse at the moment? What's in your mind next for photography? What do we need to be doing with this medium?
Yeah.
That's a huge question to ask you.
Yeah. I mean, I guess just that, really. I mean, I suppose maybe it goes all the way back to the beginning of our conversation. That when I was a kid, the news was considered really important, especially if it was about Northern Ireland. And then you had to all be quiet and watch it, and then think about what it was you'd been shown. So I really kind of urge everyone to do that. And, AI is part of it, I suppose, because, that it's a massive challenge to the idea that what we're looking at is truth. But anyway, that is something that we should be questioning. Like, I always really enjoy April Fool's Day, when the newspapers might put a jokey story that's false, and they run it in the newspaper. But that's the one day of the year where people are actually really questioning what it is they're reading, and if it can possibly be correct or not. So yeah, I think that probably, I feel that is the big challenge for photography. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Critical thinking and a critical lens.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, critical thinking. We all need to develop our faculties so much. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Media literacy, how to read an image, how to know if something's true.
Yeah.
Big subjects.
Yeah, really big subject. But I see it happening, like, say, for example, I still sometimes look at Facebook, although it's not so popular anymore, maybe because I'm a bit older. But sometimes there are images which I think these are clearly AI generated. It's so obvious, but people in the comments don't seem to have noticed at all. And then I think about, well, probably there are images where I haven't noticed at all as well. Or on the other hand, like images which are true images on Facebook, but they're being interpreted in a really kind of nationalistic kind of a way. And there again, the way that different images can be framed and interpreted. And I suppose just the vision of all of these people, some of whom may be bots, who knows, but like, people feel emboldened to say certain things that they might not have done 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, being critical of the context we read these images in. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think in that way, the internet doesn't really help. It's just can be very polarizing, as we've all seen. And
Absolutely,
it seems like it's also moving into the imaging industry, obviously.
Yeah.
With how people read images, one person sees it totally different than the other.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can be quite scary in a way, yeah.
But I guess I don't think that there was necessarily a golden age in which newspapers were 100% reliable. They were run by particular people who had particular mindsets. So yeah, I suppose it's, again, and maybe just goes back to the maps issues. The world is very, very big and complicated. So our ways of engaging with it are always quite limited. Yeah.
Do you have any really, what you would class as trusted sources, Diane, that you return to time and time again? that you have that faith in, or are you skeptical and cast that critical eye at everything that you look at now?
I think I read everything with a pinch of salt. This, I read the Guardian more than I read the Daily Mail, but I find it interesting to try to look at different outlets and see what they're saying. And especially if there's like a single big event, like how are different people reporting this single big event? That can be really interesting. Yeah. I guess that's where theory is really interesting for me as well, though. Like, I don't necessarily trust the academics that write all this amazing stuff, but I suppose they're really good critical thinkers, so I find what they have to say interesting. Yeah.
And also the comparing of these, different newspapers, different articles can be helpful to create your own critical voice. Right, in your mind. Yeah. I always tell students this as well. I think it's a necessity not to stick in your, and also when I look at the media that I usually don't read, maybe I should do that more, also to kind of keep an eye on what's out there,
Yeah, absolutely. Like, say, for example, in the UK, the Brexit vote came as a real surprise to, people like me living in London, the kind of liberal arts types. We didn't really know what people outside London were thinking, which I think was a massive error on our part. So this is one of the reasons I like to go to Facebook and look at what people who I don't agree with, look at what they're saying. So hopefully I won't make that mistake again, where I'm so clueless about what the majority, apparently, of people were actually thinking. Yeah.
That's absolutely true. Well, thanks for sharing all of this. There's always one last question that I know at least 85 or 95% of the people here are curious about. Can they reach you with, they can write to the submission form. Sometimes people are willing to share their own email address. If you are, please let us know. But I'm sure there will be pitches coming in. Car related or related to any other topic that people might pass by tonight.
Yeah, send me your car stuff and then I can persuade the team in the office. We can really go for this. It's a great idea.
I actually like that. Maybe we should help you get the car ideas.
Yeah.
I've got a suggestion already, Diane, so I'll share it with you.
Oh, nice.
We'll help you. We'll get the car issue off the ground.
I like the car idea.
Yeah.
I'm sure many of the people in here do. So they will write this to the submission address. And I would really love to thank you for your time and sharing all the beautiful work that you shared and all the knowledge. And thanks everyone for joining and for asking these great questions as well. And we'll see you in the next one again. Thanks everyone. Thanks Diane.
Bye.
Thanks, Diane. Thank you, Ilvy. Thanks, everybody.
You.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody, for being here at 5 o'clock in the morning from New Zealand. Thanks, guys.
Go back to bed in New Zealand, I think. Yeah.
Exactly. I hope so. Bye, guys.